Welcome to the Room of Lives. I'm your host, Neil. Veronica King is a math and German major at the University of Texas at Austin and the president of the local Secular Student Alliance. She's the director of our co-op, and on multiple occasions I have been impressed by her calm and collected leadership skills. In one particular meeting at the co-op, a person said something in an intimidating way, but Veronica's response to them was unafraid and calm. This immediately made an impression on me since I feel that this is how I would like to be as well. Later, I brought this up with her, and Veronica revealed that in fact, she never feels intimidated by people. On probing further, it turned out that she doesn't even know how intimidation is supposed to feel as a physical emotion in the body. I was amazed and questioned her further, and she revealed that her parents never used intimidation, punishment, discipline, or manipulation as strategies when raising them. In this conversation, Veronica shares what her parenting was like and what her parents' parenting was like. She shares her view on why intimidation is not an effective strategy, and honest explanations work better. But is all that work worth it? How would she raise her own kids? I get her view on a few situations where intimidating a child may sound acceptable. Does intimidation ever go in the opposite direction, from child to parent? I describe Indian parenting that is mostly based on authority. Then we discuss the link between the parenting cultures of different societies and their relationship with other authorities like the government or God. Okay, so you probably know what I want to talk about.
No, I do not.
You don't? I told you that I wanted to have a recorded conversation about this thing. And it was about how I noticed that you don't get easily intimidated by people. And then I was like, I wasn't sure if I had got that right or it was some kind of like a misrecognition on my part. And then it turned out that you said that when you were a kid, your parenting did not involve any like intimidation, but was more like teaching by example rather than by intimidation. And I find that really actually very interesting because I think I've rarely seen examples of parenting like around me when I was growing up, at least in India, or like with other people, where some form of intimidation was not part of their upbringing. In fact, if you tell like a lot of Indian parents the concept of parenting without intimidation, they would not even understand what then is left of parenting. And so I should confess that to me it is actually still kind of intriguing because I was thinking about this in my head afterwards and I was like, at least I think I would definitely be less intimidating than my parenting was. But there are some situations. Okay, I want to get to those situations a little bit later. But first I just wanted to kind of rehash, because we haven't had this conversation recorded, that it is true that you don't really feel intimidated in a lot of situations where maybe the other person is trying to intimidate you.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Not really, no.
Yeah, and you were saying how you don't even know what that's supposed to feel like.
Yeah, you were, I think, describing that it sort of made you feel scared sometimes, and I don't really get that.
So do you know what, like, I mean, but you're familiar with the feeling of fear.
Yeah.
So can you describe the feeling of fear, like in terms of bodily sensations?
I guess it's just the your body preparing to do something, you know? It's like an energizing sort of...
An energizing thing. But do you feel that seems almost like a positive thing?
Yeah, not like a... Not like that, but like, fight or flight.
Yeah, fight or flight.
You gotta either get out or get going.
Yeah, like I feel like my heartbeat goes up.
Yeah.
Is that happens to you? There's like a sudden like a tightening of my chest that happens to you. Okay, and maybe like it depends because there are different flavors of fear, but sometimes there's like a dropping of the stomach. And this you said you never feel like a dropping of the stomach.
I don't think so. No. I guess like literal, like on a roller coaster where your body is being moved like that, sure. But
yeah.
Outside of that, I don't think so.
So the other two reactions, which are just like, raised heartbeat, tightening of the chest, and the way that you described it, where your body is like preparing,
yeah,
that's kind of a more, in my mind, a more like an active, like about to actively respond kind of response. Whereas the stomach dropping is more of like a scared, like, oh no, I'm not gonna respond actively to it kind of thing. So you never feel those feelings that you described as fear in response to like people intimidating you?
I don't think so, no.
Oh yeah. That's pretty rare among humans. Like, do you realize that?
I mean, like, if somebody has a gun and I feel like they're going to kill me, sure, but I've never been in a situation like that.
Yeah. No, I'm not talking about gun.
I don't think somebody talking to me is going to harm me,
Yeah, but do you realize that your lack of feeling intimidation in such circumstances is quite rare?
I realized it after you pointed it out the first time.
That's crazy. That it took you... How old are you now?
I am 21.
And nobody has pointed this out to you before?
Mm-mm.
Whoa. Wow. Okay. So this might be new information to you, so you don't know whether to believe me or not. But I would say going forward from this point, just see, just maybe start making observations about how common this is. And I feel like you will find that this is actually quite uncommon.
I mean, I just don't know, like... I feel like after the first time we spoke about this, I probably should have been paying attention, but I don't remember any instances of...
Yeah.
Oh, this person is interacting with me in a way that they want me to be intimidated. I haven't noticed that.
Yeah, but I think that's part of it, is that not recognizing something as being like this person is trying to intimidate me is part of what I'm talking about, in that, and I think this probably comes from your parenting, where intimidation was not used as a tool. And for a lot of kids, intimidation is used as a tool, so the parents make sure that the child understands that they're being threatened with like loud voice or violence or threats or actual physical violence and things like that. So they're going to make sure that the child learns how to recognize that they're being intimidated, which is probably not something that you were put through. So not having been put through that as an adult, you don't really parse it.
Yeah.
Maybe. But that's also interesting, because I feel like that to me doesn't really necessarily, like, not having been intimidated as a kid doesn't necessarily predict for me that you would not be able to see it as an adult. But it works out for you. Great. I have a friend who does not see aggression. Like, in a lot of cases, a person was definitely trying to be aggressive and he doesn't even get it. And so it fizzles out for the other person. Like, he doesn't even get it. Later on, he has to be told by other people, like, this guy was really kind of trying to be aggressive. And he's like, oh? So another reason that I'm bringing this up and having this conversation is I think it's very important for me to unlearn being intimidated. Like this situation that just happened, I felt intimidated. You know, you witnessed. We're not going to go into details, but I was just like, there was a person who was mad and said some things, and I was like, oh, this person is very charged right now. And immediately my heart rate went up, and I noticed that I'm not calm at all, and I'm kind of faltering as I'm responding. But I did respond.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was listening to it, wondering if I should step in, but it seemed like you were handling it.
Yeah.
Well enough, so.
So, but did you realize that that was a situation where like one person was kind of intimidating, the other person would possibly be in a intimidated situation?
I mean, the person, as far as I can tell, doesn't really hold a position of power over you. So I didn't see that. I could tell that the person was upset, but I mean, there's not much you could do to retroactively fix the problem. So I don't really know what they were going for. You know.
That's interesting because you are parsing and talking about these situations from a very utilitarian point of view. Like, this person doesn't actually hold any power over me. Like kind of concepts like that. Whereas in the moment, intimidation is just pure emotion. You don't really care. Like the brain stops caring if this person is actually, or if I'm actually at fault or things like that. It's just the gestures and language and volume and all of that the mind has learned at some point. It's like, shit, you gotta be scared now. And so, yeah, so that's interesting. But it is important for me to unlearn some of that because I feel like that's something, I've told you this, that's something that I'm personally trying to become better at, is in situations where I feel like I am feeling intimidated. That's not a good reason for me to like back off from what is otherwise a legitimate position. So I want to kind of stand my ground. So I find, the way that you are in those situations very admirable. Now you might not be, like deliberately figured out how to do it. It might have been like just baked in your upbringing. But I think there's still something to be learned from that. So I feel like the thing to go back to is how the upbringing was. And I'm thinking, man, I think it would be really nice to bring up children without intimidating them, as foreign as that idea might be. And I was like, there are some situations though where I feel like I would not know what else to do except just like kind of tell them, dude, you can't do this, like scared them. Like for example, what if my child is being a bully to other kids?
I mean, what my dad told me a year or two ago was that like their parenting philosophy was kind of, okay, whenever Veronica hits a certain age, she's going to go into a tunnel and she's not going to listen to us anymore because she's going to be a teenager. So up until then, we have to give her as much preparation for that as possible so that when we can't reach her anymore because she's being a rebellious teenager, she has all of the stuff that we want her to have to become a good person. So I think they were just trying to get as much positive stuff into me as a human being before like 12 or 13, like middle school, and that was their whole thing.
Yeah. But you say this positive stuff, and I feel like in a lot of cultures, disciplining the child, punishing them for wrongs, scaring them. Like I remember something as simple as when little children in India don't want to eat their food, including in my family, they would be told like scary stories of there lives this character in the house and oh, he's going to come out if you don't eat your food. It starts from very young age. And if you tell these people, for them a lot of these things are positive things. So the word positive itself for me does not break it down enough. Like what is positive for your parents?
So I think the issue with discipline, scaring, and intimidating your kids is it might work when they're like 5 years old, but when they're a teenager, if you discipline them, they don't have to listen to you. If you tell them scary stories, they know they're not real anymore, right? So I guess a lot of it would be explaining the thought process. Like, you have to do this, not because I'm telling you, but because this, and this. And then whenever I'm 14 years old and I'm not listening to them, I still have, like, the way that they have explained their thought processes, that's still in my head.
Mm-hmm.
So I can think through things myself and hopefully make decisions the way they would have wanted me to.
I see. So when your parents were asking you or saying you should be doing this, they were usually also supplying some kind of reasoning.
Yeah. And I, when I was a kid, I asked a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And whenever they tried to say, because I told you so, I would say, well, why'd you tell me? So I usually got to the base reason for things, and I think they were also trying to foster that.
I see. So I'm wondering now if this was a little bit of a back and forth, as in your personality was also, well, I'm seeing the bottom half of your face after a long time. Yeah. That your personality was also kind of amenable, maybe, to upbringing like this, where you are actually kind of like this curious person, and were you actually convinced by this reasoning process? Like, after you had been given a reason, would you be like, okay, sure, I won't do it?
Yeah.
Okay, so because that's what I think sometimes, a lot of the times, parents will say this, and I think it's actually kind of true, is that you can't reason with kids all the time. Like, you can tell them a perfectly logical reason, but they're kids. They don't really know how the world of reason and logic and long-term consequences work. Like, if you say you shouldn't watch TV for that long, and you try to explain to them, it's so hard as a child to understand why you should not watch TV for longer, or why you shouldn't eat candy all the time, or something like that. The conceptual answers for those, children don't live in that world. They live in a more immediate world. And in their immediate world, there are so many cravings. Like, I just want to keep watching TV. I don't want to do homework. I want to eat candy. Yes, I want to fight with my brother and like punch him and take this thing. So that's the thing. That's why I feel like a lot of people resort to like emotional weapons, like intimidation and kind of like manipulation is bullshit, instead of reason. Don't you think? Like, so how is that?
I think it's easier short term, but you kind of get back what you put in, So if you put forth the work and time and effort to try to get logical thought into your kid's head, it's going to pay off more than just yelling at them to get them to do stuff,
I see.
I think.
So do you, well, this is kind of a hard question to answer. So I'm basically asking the question of nature versus nurture. Like, were you kind of naturally a person who was more compatible with like this kind of logical based teaching, versus did you become that because your parents were trying to prioritize that way of bringing you up?
I have no idea. I think I'm a pretty logical person. I think my sister is as well.
Yeah.
We were raised by the same people.
Yeah.
We also have similar genes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, because I feel like it would be amazing to try and generalize your upbringing as widely as possible.
There is a lady that I'm watching on TikTok a lot nowadays. She has 2 sons, and she is very, like, she explains everything to them. Like you can't use the knife because it is dangerous, and you can only use this specific knife, and only when mom is here watching you to make sure that you're okay.
Yeah.
Like that sort of thing. And I think, like, she is a full-time mom. That is her entire thing. So she has the time and the energy to do stuff like that and explain to a 2-year-old why boiling water is dangerous, So it's definitely, like, a privilege to be able to spend that much time on your kids and communicate with them. But it works for her. I don't know what kind of people her children would have been if they had a different parent. But I don't know what kind of person I would be if I were raised differently. So.
Yeah. And I wonder what kind of parenting your parents had. Do you have any idea about that?
um, not really. I feel like my mom's household was pretty chaotic. She was the oldest of 3 kids. Her dad was at work all the time. Her mom was at work all the time? I'm not sure. And then my dad, he was an only child. Um, I would say lower middle class ish.
Hmm.
He grew up both in Germany and in the U.S. because his dad was in the army, and they would switch back and forth because his mom was German. So he got a cross-cultural upbringing, I guess. But I don't really know much about the family dynamics.
Yeah. And do you feel like this thing about the upbringing of you and your sister being kind of more like reason based, is this more of is this more due to one parent versus the other, or would you say both of them have this culture?
I feel like both of them. I think my dad's more logical than my mom. My
Yeah.
mom's a little more emotional,
Yeah.
but I don't think either of them were yelling at me, trying to scare me to get me to do stuff.
Yeah. But do you ever feel intimidated by, yeah, you do feel intimidated by situations, right? Because you're like, this move-in thing that's going to happen, you said you're like freaked out by it. So I would not maybe necessarily say intimidated, but like feel different flavors of fear, anxiety, worry about situations.
You mean to move out, move in?
Yeah, you said you felt.
I mean, I'm nervous that it's not going to go well.
Yeah.
And I feel like one of my responsibilities is to help make sure that it goes well. I guess tasks can be intimidating, right? When you're assessing what you're gonna have to do and you're worried that you might not be able to do it. Is that
Mhm.
intimidation?
Yeah, I guess you can be intimidated. Yeah. But the thing that you're lacking seems to be intimidation by humans. Yeah. So the other kind of genre of questions that I wanted to ask you is, how would you raise your own kids? Presumably, like similarly, as far as this is concerned.
Yeah, I would want to make sure that number one, I have plenty of time to be a parent. If I'm going to have a kid, I don't want to be working for. I want a good amount of time when they're first developing, just to hang out with them and train them on how to be a human and stuff. And I would try to make sure that they understand, because kids are people. I feel like a lot of people forget that, they're small, but they're actual people. They have emotions. They can understand things to some extent. Sorry. But I would definitely try to get on their level, explain to them why things are happening. If they do something wrong, explain to them why it's wrong, so that it's not just, I can't do this because mom told me not to. It's, I shouldn't do this because this, and this. I think that's a more solid background to get them to make the right decisions.
Yeah, but my thought is that I feel like, yeah, a lot of people would say that even after you explain something to a child, they just do it. They just do the thing that you ask them not to do, even after you explain to them. And I think some people, some parents, lose their patience at some point, and they're like, "You're not going to listen to reason, so now I have to create something that you will be scared of." And
I don't want my kids to be afraid of me.
yeah. But I understand that. But you can't think of any situation where your reasoning strategy would fail.
I mean, I'm sure if there's an emergency, like my kid is trying to run out into a street where there is traffic, I'm not going to say, "Hey, you shouldn't do this because cars are dangerous." I'm going to grab them and keep them from running out into the street, But
yeah.
I hope that I will be in a position where I can take the time with my kids to explain things multiple times, even if it gets annoying. And hopefully eventually it'll drill into their little skulls and they'll figure things out. maybe after I do this with one child, I will decide that is enough. I can't do any more.
Yeah. But I feel like in a sense, it is a lot more work, but it is worth it because the outcome of that is basically the manifestation of a full human being and the ways that in which they're going to conduct themselves in the world, in the ways that they're going to show up to situations that's going to be noticed by other people, and then they're going to be questioned about it.
And they're going to get recorded.
And they're going to get recorded.
They're going to...
And they're going to maybe inspire something here and there. So that's the full outcome of how your parents, it's like, it cascades. Yeah, parenting is seen as a very different ballgame in India.
How so?
The role of parents are to be mostly a disciplining authority that are kind of there to, they're doing it for your good, but they're not your friend, and they are mostly a kind of an authority. Oh, something else. A while ago, I started thinking about the connection between parenting culture in a nation, let's say, or in some part of the world, what kind of parenting culture they have, and what kinds of authoritarian ideas that they have in the sphere of government and in the sphere of religion. And I feel like there is a parallel. Like if parenting in a country, let's say, is very authoritarian, then their government also tends to be authoritarian, and their religious views also tend to be authoritarian. And the way that they relate to their government is the way that they relate to their parents. And the way that they relate to the world through God is also kind of the way. Because parents are the first flavor of authority. It fucking bakes into your head. And then wherever you're looking for authority in large systems, hierarchical systems, you create what you saw. And you are also an atheist.
I was just raised like that.
Yeah.
Like an active choice.
You were raised atheist, right? Yeah. So I don't think that's a big coincidence here that you were kind of raised without this kind of commanding authority, and so you don't really see that in the universe either. And what are your kind of like political views? What ist are you, if you had to find a word?
When I do, the like chart where you take a quiz and it puts you on the chart.
Yeah.
I'm like in the bottom left corner.
What does that mean? What are those things?
The libertarian left.
Yeah. Okay, that squares.
Low government left policies.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So for example, I've seen this parallel that in India, both parents and governments are more authoritative. We expect the government to like kind of bark rules at us, but also just like catch us when we fall, all kinds of social nets and things like that. And we were like complaining, why doesn't the government do this for us? Why doesn't the government do that for us? In the same way that we complain about parents. And the government just comes in and says in India, although it's a democracy, it's kind of like heavy-handed. Oh, you're not going to do this. Oh, you're not going to do that, in the same way that parents do. Whereas in the United States, individual freedom is more important, both in family structure. Like parents kick children out at a certain age, and then they're just supposed to fend for themselves. And government too. It feels like it's like less authoritative, but also at least, there are social programs, but at least they don't make a big deal out of like, oh yeah, this is what we're here for. Things like that.
It's a lot of figure it out on your own.
Yeah.
In the US.
And then I noticed, like, for example, in some more like really strictly Islamic countries, like in the Middle East, I know a couple of people from there, and I know that parenting in those families can also be very kind of authoritarian. And I think Islam there's just no mincing. It is kind of like an authoritarian understanding of what God is. Like there are these rules, and you have to kind of follow these rules. And I feel like the government is also kind of like more authoritarian, and there are like a lot of rules and kind of like a system of reward and punishment to learn the rules. Um, yeah, so that's kind of interesting. So that's gonna be your personal. Your personal attempt is going to be just like explaining things as much as possible.
Yeah.
Man, I would like to do that too, but I'm like, what if my kid is just a dick?
You just gotta hope that it ain't.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like some kids can be kind of like dicks with no, at least apparently good reason. Like they will take an insect and slowly pull out its like wings and legs and just wanna have fun, like torturing something. And I feel like if I see my kid do that, I'm going to like, um, I don't know. At some point, I'm going to like run out of like kind and reasoning things to say, because I'm like, at the bottom of the day, when I was your age, I had something called empathy where it hurt for me too. And if you don't have that, I don't know how like reasoning is gonna.
Train that,
Yeah. I think some kids definitely have more empathy than others. And so if a kid has more empathy and more feeling, then when they understand, okay, I'm going to be hurting a person if I do this, that kind of works for them. But for other kids, the reasoning, somehow it like,
Do we know if that's like a brain chemical thing that you're born with, or if it's something that like your parents were shitty?
I think that's $1 million question. Because I've heard this thing where like if a kid is like acting out weird or being like that, a lot of people say there must be something going on in the family. I don't know where I stand about that because I just don't have enough information.
Yeah. I hope my kid isn't an asshole. I don't know what I would do, because you can't explain that, making other people feel bad is bad. Like, how do you?
Yeah.
That feels innate to me.
Yeah, so, but for some people, they have to learn it through proxy. Like, if you make other people feel bad, maybe you don't understand that, but you're going to be made to feel bad in a very direct way because I'm going to slap you. And then they remember that. They actually remember, like, through a Pavlovian conditioning, that if I beat up another kid, something bad is going to happen to me. And that's how they learn not to do that, not out of empathy. And the interesting thing is that some religions do the same thing. It's like, they're like, if you do bad things to other people, you're going to go to hell. So they're basically encouraging people to do the right thing out of fear of their own personal consequences.
How well does that work?
Huh?
How well does that work?
I don't know, but a lot of people will argue that it's very effective in
There are
keeping
a lot of-
bad behavior in check.
I feel like there's a lot of devout religious people that are not good people. Despite believing in whatever punishment system that their God has come up with.
Yeah.
So I don't understand how the punishment system works if there are still people. I mean, if you look in the Catholic Church, for example,
Yeah.
like it
Yeah,
doesn't
that's
seem
true.
to be working too well.
Yeah, but I guess the counter argument would be, I mean, of course, people are not all good people, but at least religion has, like, if you're afraid of these rules and things like that, at least it limits the amount of damage that you would cause to the world. You don't think?
I feel like there's a lot of very powerful people in the world that either are religious or, in quotes, are religious, that are doing a lot of damage despite having learned their entire life. Like, you do bad things, you get punishment from God.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they are somehow justifying the bad things and saying, oh, this is actually, like, I read the text my way and it makes it okay, or if they just think they're special. Like, I'm not going to go to hell.
Yeah.
or I guess to some extent, it's not. I think in some I don't know that much about Christianity, but my understanding of it is it's not necessarily do bad things go to hell. It's if you aren't one of the chosen ones, you go to hell.
Mm-hmm.
And if you believe, no matter how bad you are, you go to heaven.
Yeah, it depends on flavors of Christianity, I guess.
It's a
But yeah, I mean, so I've been an atheist from a young age, and I have dated like multiple people who are pretty religious. And I've definitely met a lot of people who are like, no, this kind of an authoritarian structure in the world, in parenting or whatever, where you don't question the authority and you live by its rules, kind of a little bit apprehensive of the bad consequences of breaking the rules, is absolutely necessary in order for you to. And I have like tried to push back against it as much as possible. And I think I'm very interested in not only bringing up kids in a non-authoritarian teaching environment, but also the possibility of bringing up whole human generations in systems that are not, unquestioning authority. Because I feel like it's possible for people, like for a bottom-up kind of self-regulating, learning things on your own. But it's definitely trickier, if nothing else. It's more complex.
yeah.
Parenting by intimidation, you go back to the same tool again and again. It's like a blunt object. Whereas parenting without intimidation, it's a whole lot more complex. So I think the answers are going to be different every situation.
I think it's possible that explaining everything with reasoning works to the point, like as long as your kid doesn't pick apart insects for fun.
Yeah.
But then at that point, I don't know how to explain that causing pain to others is bad. So that might be where, if they don't just get that, the authoritarianism has to step in. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And that might be, why religions were created in the first place, for the people that don't avoid bad things because they're bad. They need an extra reason, right?
Yeah.
And I guess it's worked to some extent. Like our species has survived this long.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we would be doing better or worse without any religion, but that's another $1 million question, I guess. But yeah, I'm definitely. I feel like nowadays, less people are having kids. One and two, people who are having kids, they're not just, at least in the U.S. and Western countries, as far as I can tell, they're not just having kids because that's what you're supposed to do. You get a job, get married, have kids. That's how life works. They're actually choosing to do it actively, and I think that'll definitely make a difference in how people parent, because they're not just doing it because their parents did it. They're doing it because they want to bring a human into this world, and that's got to affect how you treat the human and how you raise them and who they become. So I do have I do think that generations of questioning people who weren't raised fully by intimidation might be coming. I don't know though.
Yeah. There is a bit of a opposite argument to that I had read once, where there was this guy who was a foreigner who became a teacher in China. And he basically had to deal with the generation of kids who were born during China's like one-child policy. And so these were kids who were single children of like pretty well-to-do middle-class people, who, because of the government, focused all of their resources and attention and spoiling on these kids. And so when he was a teacher, he would like repeatedly encounter situations where this kid growing up has basically been used to having it all, and their parents are constantly ferociously demanding for more space and everything. And so as a teacher, as he's trying to like teach and like draw a fair line, like, no, you don't get that grade or things like that, it's like they like freak the fuck out, and he's like, oh shit, there has been this fallout of this China's one-child policy that it's basically now a generation of brats. So that's the kind of like other possible counter argument, is that if people are having fewer kids and when they do, they're spending a lot more resources on them, then some of these children might be trained in such a way that it's the opposite thing, I mean,
They
of course they
expect
don't get
that-
intimidated, but they're like, I can do whatever the fuck I want, because
and-
that's the cocoon in which they grew up.
Yeah. I'm sure that having a sister made me a very different person from who I would have been if I were an only child. I don't understand the dynamic of people that the entire time their parents were just focused on them.
Yeah.
Like that blows my mind. But I feel like there's a difference between like giving your kid everything that it wants and like taking an active role in parenting using reasoning and non-intimidation tactics, right? Even if the kid is like your main focus, you can understand I'm not going to spoil them. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I know what you're talking about.
It'll be interesting as people have less kids, how they, and there are more only kids being born, I'm sure, how they change like the societal makeup and everything.
I think this opposite problem, actually is also an intimidation problem, but in the opposite direction, where parents learn to become intimidated by their kids' every demand and whatever, The kids learn that too. They're like, if I throw a tantrum and it works every time, they're going to learn to intimidate through whatever means they have.
And if you've only had the one kid, you don't. I feel like in a lot of cases, once someone gets to their second kid, they've already gone through things. They're like, oh, I can survive a tantrum now. I've gone through them a bunch, right?
Yeah.
But the first one, it's got to be different, You haven't gone through those first stages of having a baby and having a kid yet. It's just got to be a balance.
Yeah.
You have to respect each other as individuals. Not let yourself get walked over, but also not walk over your kid.
Yeah. I feel like this is something that kind of matters to me because when I was growing up, my dad particularly was like an angry person, and I learned to become intimidated a lot. And so when I was a little bit older, and I felt like that anger kind of like accumulated within me, and I would lash out a lot of times at other people. And then at some point I started chilling out, especially when I got out of the home environment and there was nothing coming at me. So whatever was within started to dissipate. And I became over time a lot chiller, like deliberately. I was like, dude, I need to like chill out. This anger is not good. But then I noticed that in certain situations, I was starting to become a little bit more like doormat-ish, where because I did not want to have this confrontational thing that for a long time had kind of poisoned my life, I was actively avoiding any kind of confrontation, including ones that needed to happen. And I feel like now I'm in a stage where I'm trying to really be very mindful and realize that the balance is not in one direction or the other, but it's somewhere in the middle. It's kind of like a razor's edge. And so I have to modulate both my tendency for anger and my tendency for fear so that I can walk that kind of like tightrope. And this confrontation that you just saw, I was actually kind of on that tightrope because I was oscillating internally between being intimidated and between lashing out. And so like a conversation like this is like very important for me because I feel like there's the verbal part of the conversation where we're talking about concepts, but there's also some kind of, and the verbal concepts I'll probably forget after a few days or weeks. But there is some non-verbal aspects, some little vibey thing that I notice kind of stays inside and maybe like percolates slightly informs me in a charged situation the next time, you know. Some little fraction of these concepts like
They're gonna
steps in a situation. Yeah.
I thought you did a great job handling that situation.
Oh yeah, thank you.
I did notice that you seem to be getting a little more angry, and I was like, oh no, but you reined it in. It wasn't.
Yeah,
too
yeah,
much,
thank
you
you.
know?
I know that that's something where I have a lot of room for improvement, and I feel like I'm trying to focus a lot of energy in improving that corner of my. Yeah, we'll see.
But yeah, that's. I want to make sure that my kids can ask questions, and I'm not saying because I said so, right? Because that's going to encourage them to just, anytime someone says something, they just have to go along with it. I don't want them to feel like that with me or with anyone else.
So could you simulate for yourself if you were on the receiving end of this kind of person who's like angry and saying this should have happened, why is this blah blah, in the same situation, I'm just kind of describing it. How do you feel you would have responded in that situation? Could you simulate?
I was actually thinking about bringing up that has been an issue for us as well. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just an issue for that person, and that we all hate it, and it sucks, and I'm sorry. But again, you knew that this was a thing that happens, and just because I wasn't able to prevent it, I mean, you could have prevented it as well, right? I also probably would have, I don't have work and school the way you do, so I wouldn't have ended up in that situation, I don't think, but that's how I would try to, make sure they know, we know this is an issue. It happens a lot. I'm sorry it happened to you this time. It doesn't just happen to you.
Yeah. But do you feel like you would have stayed calm?
Yeah, I mean, how would me yelling at them help anything?
No, it's not. People don't become not calm because they decide that it's going to help the situation.
Okay, yeah.
It's just they're just wired in a certain way that they get certain stimuli and they become not calm, which is what happened to me. Mm-hmm. Like, I totally know that if I was calmer, I would have been more effective.
I'm not sure.
No, I know that there was way more room for me to be more calm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if that person just keeps on going, like, what's their end goal, right? They just keep getting more and more mad, and you stay calm.
Yeah.
I guess eventually they would diffuse themselves, right?
Yeah, I think when you're calm, it like diffuses the other person. Yeah. But so you would have been calm.
I think so.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, that's just part of it. I think that's like a rare, good quality. Yeah.
I mean, this is all speculation. I don't know how I would actually react.
No, I have actually seen you in situations where you definitely stayed very calm, and in those situations, if I was in your position, I would not have stayed calm. I would either have lashed out or I would have felt like really intimidated. Usually it's a mixture of both. It's both happening at the same time. Because I think aggression is a reflection of fear. And so it's like, they feed into each other.
Yeah, something I say a lot is like the way that someone is acting towards you is mostly about them and not about you. Mm-hmm. Like if they want to get a reaction out of you, or they are doing things because of themselves, it's not like I try not to take things personally and react.
Yeah, but I think that also has to do with the parenting, that the kinds of lessons that were drilled into your mind as a child, for some kids, they were made to feel like things were about them, things were their fault. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them grow up, I think, with like crippling self-esteem issues, making everything about them, and always doing things in order to make the other person not angry or happy. And that seems to be their end goal, without thinking about is this the morally correct thing to do or not, and things like that.
And
That's
is
just
this
how they,
right for me?
Yeah,
my,
yeah.
My mental health.
They
my
basically
emotional health.
learn to associate good or bad by, is this person like pleased with me or not?
Mhm.
Thanks for joining Veronica and me today in the Room of Lives. See you later, crocodile.